Okay, so today we're talking about working with ranges of cells, cells and ranges. We've got homework due tonight, the row highlighter. Any questions on that? I guess I could take a question or two on this if anyone has questions. Who's still working on that or hasn't submitted it yet? A few of you? Yeah? All right. But our exercise today is going to be right here, census.xlsm. So go ahead and download that file. Oh, I think I've already downloaded it. And go ahead and get it opened up. And this will be the context for our example today. This is actually pretty fun day. You know, sometimes we cover a lot of the waterfront, but don't really do a meaningful example. Today, we're not going to cover as much about ranges as we might if we just kind of did it in an abstract way, but we're going to do a great example. And it starts with this data that I downloaded long ago from the United States Census Bureau. I forget what they called it, but it's called census.xlsm, so I can remember what it was. When you get that open, I would like somebody to say something about this data. I almost said say something interesting, but that's too high of a threshold. Just tell me something about the data that we're looking at here. This really is, with one tiny exception, this is exactly the way that I downloaded the data from the Bureau. What do you think? What can you tell me about this data? Suppose your boss handed this to you as he was headed out of the office. Here, I need you to help me make sense of this. And he's gone, or she's gone. And now you got to figure it out. What are you going to figure out? It'll be important, for you to kind of look at your own because I'm only showing one tab. There's a bunch of tabs here. Did you have a comment? Okay, but what you're saying is this first row is different. It's kind of fundamentally different than the rest of the data. Okay, it looks like it's maybe some kind of a code, maybe for the data that's in the column or something. Okay? Yep. The sample size is around 3,000. I don't know how we got to sample size so far, but you're saying there's 3,000 records. Closer to 4,000. I think it's 3,900 or something. Maybe it's 3,100. 190 something. Okay, yeah. So there's a bunch of, and based on your language, you said sample size. What you're saying is you think that each row is maybe an observation of something. I think that's probably pretty good. But an observation of what? In the back? Okay, so you're inferring from the headers that we're seeing here. This might be some kind of demographic information. We've got age, pop, PST. I don't know what PST stands for. Sex. We got sex. Where's that? Column M. Look at that. Okay, good. But I think you can come up with, I think it's possible, without too much work, to come up with specifically. I mean, so you've gotten us partway there. You said, it looks like this is some kind of demographic data. But I think you could tell me specifically what those are. There's a comment here. I don't want to go to the next sheet. I want you to tell me what sex is. I mean, not what sex is, but what's column M? What? Yeah. Didn't your folks talk to you? Resident population, total female percent. Oh, well, that makes sense because I look at these numbers and it's 50%, 50.7, 51.6, 51, 47, all kind of around 50%. So this is the proportion of women, and had it in some context. We haven't figured out what that is yet. And how did you know that? Over on the data dictionary, that's what we have. So here, if we look at that sex 255208. I come back here to data dictionary, I should be able to find, there it is, sex 255208, resident population, total females. Okay, so this is the full description of that variable or that column of data, and then that is the abbreviation of it that I actually see in the data set. Okay, very good. So now we have a sense where we can figure out what the data in each column are. So now we've had a hunch, an assumption that a row is an observation, that a row is, we're looking at some entity, and we're recording all these values about that entity. But what is, for instance, here I am on row number 8. Who is that for? What's the entity? Go ahead. Blount County, Alabama. Right, we come over to the county name sheet, and we can see this code right here, 1009. We match that code up over here. Better go more to the top. 1009. It's Blount County, Alabama. No telling how they pronounce it. It's in the South. It might even have an extra syllable that we don't see there. Good. So now what we know is that this is county data. So if we come back here, we should be able to say, number 9, column M, in Blount County, in this census data, what we have is just slightly more women than men because it's 50.3% women as the total resident population. Is percent female. Okay, so that's pretty good. All right, so now I think we've got a sense for the data that we're dealing with, but what would you say? Is this data easy to gain some insight from, or is it hard to gain some insight from? Yeah, we could work with it, but this isn't really lined up well for us to kind of go snooping around. And suppose we wanted to look at just a particular county, or maybe we want to compare a couple of counties. Like you say, give me a county, Cache County, Utah, and compare that to Wasatch County. Is there a Wasatch County in Utah? Compare that to Juab County in Utah. That's going to be a little difficult. Even harder if I want to compare Juab County, Utah, to Bibb County, Alabama, because they're nowhere near each other on this data. So our goal for today is to be able to build a tool that will allow the user to easily choose a county and look at the data and be able to read it and see it easily without having to go back and forth between tab and tab, and also to be able to compare multiple counties side by side simultaneously. That's where we're headed. Are you ready to do it? In the meantime, we'll learn some stuff about cells and ranges. In the meantime, no. Along the way, we'll be learning about cells and ranges. So I'm going to begin by creating a new worksheet that I'm going to, I'll call this like my summary worksheet. Or I'll call it compare. Don't call it summary. It's not really a summary, it's a comparison. Compare, C-U-M-P-A-R-E. And just for my own sanity, I'm going to put it as the very first tab, but it really doesn't matter where it is for what we're doing. So I'm going to use this tab to allow the user to select a county. Did I spell it wrong? C-O-M. That's the Spanish spelling for something. I don't know. C-O-M-P-A-R-E. All right. C-O-M-P-A-R-E. Oh, I want to give the way for a user to choose a county, and then I want to be able to see the data for that county, and I'd like to see it preferably with the labels for the data right here, because all those codes at the top, they're pretty difficult to work with. So I'm going to begin just by coming to the data dictionary. I'm just going to copy the variable names in. So I'm just going to copy all of column B, and I'm going to bring it right over here into my compare sheet. And I'll paste it in column A. And I don't really need the item description label. I'll get rid of that, and we'll leave everything starting right where it is. Row 3 is a fine place to start for what we're doing. So now the idea is we give the user some way to choose. They'll choose a county, and then it will just drop the county information right in here so that we can see what the number is directly next to the description of what the data are. So far, so good. Any thoughts on how we're going to get the user to pick a county? How should we do that? There's lots of different ways we can have the user pick a county. Any thoughts? Got to get some input from the user. Go ahead. Oh, dialog box. So we could pop up some kind of a box through VBA that says, choose your county. Now, of the ones that we know so far, we only have the message box and we have the input box. Message box, you can't really type anything to, but you could type something into the input box. So you could put up an input box, you could type in the name of your county, and then if it's me, I'm going to type it wrong. So that's a problem. So now it turns out you said dialog box, and we're going to learn how we can create our own custom dialog boxes. So we could put like a drop-down list so they could choose from it in the dialog box or whatever, but we're not there yet. That's going to be a task for a different day. So the input box would work, but I think there's too much overhead for us to have to figure out, well, you didn't quite type it right. Should we guess at what they mean? Should we find the one closest alphabetically to what they did? There could be a lot of work in there. I'd rather do something that doesn't let them make a mistake. Other thoughts? Yep. Data validation. Let's just take a look at that approach real quick. It's not the one we're going to use, but it's a reasonable thing, a reasonable place to start. So I'm here on cell A1. I'm going to come over here to data validation, which I think is this one, data validation. And instead of allowing any, you're welcome to this along if you want. I'm going to delete this here in just a minute, so maybe just watch. I'm going to say, no, I want this to be a list. Where do I want the list to come from? I don't know. It's over here in the county names. So I'll come over here to county names, and I'll choose column D. That should be okay. I'm not sure if I should take all the column, or maybe just get the data that's here. So maybe I'll select there, Control-Shift down arrow. This is actually the one change that I made to the worksheet, is that I made column D so we could have the county and the state together in one in one column just for this purpose. So now that looks pretty good. I'll say OK. And so now I get a little drop-down list here, and now I can pick from one of these. I can come and pick Blount, Alabama, or Butler, Alabama, or Bullock, Alabama, or whatever. So that's pretty good. Now, the trouble is that when I do this, it gives me, all I know is I now have the name of the county. So that's pretty good. The user has picked the county. And now I could take that and maybe go find that county over here in the county names, and I've got all the information I need about that county, and use that to kind of bootstrap this. So the truth is this would work just fine, but there's one that's going to be a little bit simpler for us to use. So I'm going to back this one out, come to my data validation, and change this back to any. And I'll show you another way to make a drop-down list. I'll go ahead and get rid of that value there as well. Okay, so for this one, we're going to come to the Developer tab. And on the Developer tab, we have the little toolbox. Looks like a wrench and a screwdriver, a little toolbox. Now, we have two groups of tools in this toolbox, and they both allow us to drop these different controls, as they're called, or these tools, directly onto my worksheet. The first group are called form controls. Generally speaking, they look better, and they're easier to use. ActiveX controls, they're also there. They are more powerful. So we can do more with them, but the trade-off comes that they're a little bit more difficult to work with. And so we've already used the button once to assign a macro to a button, but this time we're going to bring in the next one over, which is a combo box. So it's called a combo box because it's a combination of a list and a text box where you could just type something in or you could drop something down. So I'm going to choose that control, and then I'm going to do a click and drag to draw that control here onto my worksheet. Probably much wider than it needs to be, but that'll be okay. So now, this is really different than data validation because the data validation happens to a cell. I'm saying what's allowed to go into a cell. This is a control. It's an object sitting on top of the worksheet. It's not in, you can see it's like going back and forth between A1 and A2. It's like spanning the gap between those two. It's not in any cell. It's just floating wherever it is. I can move it around. Okay, so this is different. But we can configure it in a way that's pretty similar. I'm going to right-click this. I think I'm going to right-click it. And we're going to choose Format Control. So just like with data validation, it needs to know, hey, what's the data that's allowed to show up here? So I'll choose that input range, and I'll come back to my county names. And this one I do want you to do along with me because this one's going to stick for us. And I'll do the same thing here. I want that whole range of data. So Western Wyoming all the way up to the very top, including where it says all of the United States. That's one of my choices. So even though this is county level data, they aggregate it up to the state level, which is what row 2 is. You can see it's Alabama State. Then we've got counties showing up. They even aggregate it up to the whole country. So that tells me where the list is coming from, D1 to D3196. And now my cell link says, I got to know some cell to put the results in, some way to communicate back to you which one the user chose. And I'm going to put that right in at range A1, cell A1. So you may have to click off of it and click back on it, I'm not sure. Now, here we can also say, drop down lines. How many lines do we want to drop down? We have some control over that. I'm going to change that up to 20. So how big is the list going to be when it drops down? Yeah, I want a little more than 8. I'll go to 20. And what do we have here? 3D shading? Wow, how can you pass up on 3D shading? I'm going to check 3D shading. Oh, and look at that. It just looks like it's sunken down onto the page. That's amazing. What will they think of next? Now that I've clicked off of that, I should be able to click on the little drop-down arrow, and here I've got all of those counties. I should be able to come down here to Kansas somewhere. Why is there more than 20? And the answer is there are 20 showing. That 20 is controlling how tall the list is, but it's going to have all of them in it. So all 3,100 whatever there is. There's Kansas. I'm going to go find my county in Kansas. I have my own county. I'm in the L's. There's Gov County, Kansas. Oop. A student pointed out to me in the last section, there's also an Allen County, Kansas. I should love Kansas. They got counties for both my names. So question in the back? Yeah. Oh, why use this instead of data validation? And the answer is, notice what it's putting here in A1. It's not putting the name that we've chosen, it's giving us a number. Now, what does that number mean? It's not a row. Other thoughts? Yeah, it's a number in the list. Now, because our list starts in row 1, the number in the list is going to correspond directly to the row. But it's only because our list happens to start in row 1. The list could start anywhere, and if it started down somewhere lower, I'd get a 1 when the first one was chosen, and that might correspond to row 20 or something on the worksheet. But in this case, it will correspond directly. And so that's really the only advantage that we have here, is that it gives us a number that we can use to jump immediately to the row that we're after. And the truth is, without too much work, we could use data validation as well. Yep. Okay. So, oh, you mean like come in here and it's like start typing? Like something? Yeah, this control doesn't do that. Remember when I said the ActiveX controls were a little bit more capable? Not as easy to work with? I'm not entirely sure if the ActiveX combo box will do that or not. But you don't know any better, so there you go. It would take a different control. I don't know in terms of data validation. Does data validation kind of give you that fill-in as well? You start typing and it gives it to you? Oh, that might be a better reason to use data validation. Yeah, but not today. If you really want to. We finished like 10 minutes early in the last class. Maybe we could come back and put on data validation. We could modify it. Let's go ahead and go through this example first. By the way, just talking about it now, given the choice between seeing how to do this with the combo box and with data validation, with that being the choice option 1 and option 2 getting out 10 minutes early, what would you prefer? Vote for 2 here. Vote for 1, more learning. Like 3 of you. These are going to be upset. They'll be upset at you. We should have had a secret ballot, Fed. Okay. So now here's what I'd like to do. I would like to say when we've chosen a particular county right here, I would like to put in the county and then the state right here, and then we'll put in all the data for them down below. So let's begin by getting ourselves a procedure that will do that. So I'm going to do Alt F11 to bring up my code window, insert a module, delightful, sub show county data. Delightful. Okay. In fact, maybe even before we start showing the data, what I'd like to do is just get this so we can actually see it work. So I'm going to do a debug.print right here. And I'm going to print the number, the row number that we're after. So maybe just showing data for county number, and then I will concatenate onto here. Now I'm not really entirely sure what sheet is going to be the active sheet when this runs, so I'm going to go ahead and declare myself a variable, dim s as a worksheet. Set s equal to this workbook dot worksheets. Which worksheet do I want? The one named I just created, the one I created named compare. Okay. Okay, so now I've got an object variable. I've bound that object variable onto a particular worksheet. So now I can say I'm interested in what is ever in worksheet S, the compare worksheet, dot range A1 dot value. Okay, so this is no new way to refer to cells. We've been doing this from the beginning of class, but this is in the context of today. That's one way to refer to a range. You say range, and then you give it the string that you're interested in to identify the range. While we're talking about this approach, let me just do a little exploration here in the immediate window of some other things I can do with this particular syntax. And so I'm going to say range. If I don't tell it which sheet is it going to assume? I'm not telling it which sheet to work on. Which one does it assume? Active worksheet. If I don't tell it which workbook, it assumes the active workbook, so it kind of builds in all of that. So I can just say A1 dot select, and that shouldn't be any surprise. Now, probably also not a surprise that I can say A1 to A5, just in the same way I would refer to a range inside a formula, and that refers to that whole one. But here's where it does get a little bit different. is that inside these quotes, I can get a little more complex. I can say I got A1 to A5, comma, and then pick up again on A12, like A12 to A18. A12 colon A18. All as one string argument, so the comma is not separating two different arguments for the range method. It's just giving me one long string that happens to have a comma on the inside. And so I can select discontiguous ranges, or refer to discontiguous ranges, using this range method. That's pretty good. Questions? Oh, yeah, there shouldn't be a question mark here. That should be like address. I'm going to print something here. That's going to print that off. I'm actually kind of surprised I didn't give me an error. But yeah, because I'm not really asking it to print anything here. I just want to select it. So yeah, that was just my mistake. No question mark needed. It doesn't help at all. Oh, so what does the question mark do in the first place? And the answer is the question mark prints. It's a shortcut for the keyword print. So if I say print 5 plus 5, that'll print 10. Same thing with question mark 5 plus 5. It's just, yeah, it's a shorter way to do it. As we all know, the less I type, the better for everyone. Go ahead. Oh, there's a reason I capitalized the first A. No, I'm not sure why that happened. It works fine. Case doesn't matter. Okay, so that's just kind of a little more detail about what we can do with range. It doesn't have to just be a single cell. It can be a multi-cell range. It can even be discontiguous multi-cell range. All right, so now I want to go ahead and get this part working. So we have used, over here on the Developer tab, in the toolbox, we have used the command button here that allows us to execute some code. But we can also make code execute in response to something happening on this combo box. Watch this. I'm going to right-click this combo box, and I'm going to choose Assign Macro. And now that I have that macro built there, Show County Data, I'll select that and say OK. I'll now click off of the combo box so it's not selected, and make sure that we can see both halves of my Excel here. And now, when I make a change here, it should give me an error. What did it give me an error for? Set this workbook to worksheets, compare this workbook.worksheets. Oh, I named S as a workbook. So here I said S, I made S a workbook variable, and because it's an object variable, but when I told it it's of type workbook, that limits me to what I can bind it onto. What can I bind it onto? Workbooks. I'm trying to bind onto a worksheet. I got a problem. So this should have said worksheet. My mistake. Yeah, reset, and we'll try that again. And that should now make it so that when I choose one, it prints just that number that's in cell A1. There's 942, 946, and so forth. You can't see it, but it's what's actually in A1. So there's 954, 954. So we've connected these two up. Our next step then is going to be to actually put the county and the state that we've selected right here in B1 and B2. Okay, there's a question?
Yeah,
so the question is, does this mean that now every time we change that input box, it's going to rerun the macro? And the answer is, that is exactly right. So on the command button, every time you click it, it runs the macro that's associated with it. On a combo box, every time you change its value, it executes the code that's attached to it, the macro that's assigned to it. So question in the back? Oh, good question. I don't know the answer to that. So let me go ahead and clear this off so we're kind of not confused about what used to be there. So I'm going to select Logan County, Kansas. It printed Logan County, Kansas. It printed the number there for Logan County, Kansas. Now I'm going to drop it down again, and I'm going to click Logan County again. It did not. Yeah, so it's actually when it's not when it's selected, it's when it changes. Yeah, very good. I did not know the answer to that. I might have used to have known the answer to that. It could be that sometime years ago someone asked me that question, and I did exactly the same thing I did, but I didn't remember it. Go ahead. Is there a reason why? Yeah, so so the question is, hey, I'm right click, I choose right click, assign macro, and I got nothing. Nothing shows up here, yeah? There's probably something typed in here, but in terms of the list to pick from, it's not there. So let's go, yeah, so what that means is that a couple things. The first one that comes to mind is that to be able to assign a macro to a control, it has to be in a general module. So number one, let's make sure that you've got this little symbol over here, which I don't know how to describe. It looks kind of like a bunch of little squares linked to each other, cubes or something linked to each other. That's the kind of module it has to be in. So if you're on the work, there's other modules in here. There's a module behind this workbook and each one of these worksheets, and you might have said insert a class module instead of a module. So it's got to be in a general module. Is that what you've got? Do you have that symbol? Hey, Parker, would you come help see if you can see what the trouble is here? Parker, we'll see if you can get that figured out. And if he's not up to the task, I'll come over and take a look myself. Oh, yeah. What was it? Oh, okay. So it wasn't actually in a general module. Code fears you, Parker. You get over there and it got right in line. Okay. So now, tell me so I've got I have access to a number. How am I going to actually get this to refer to? I've told Logan, Kansas. I want to put Logan right here in B and or B1 and B2. I want to put Kansas, just the abbreviation KS. Talk to me in English. Give me an English language algorithm that will do that. What do I do? Okay, so we might be able to use a VLOOKUP, and so this is. Kind of thinking about this from coming from an Excel background, you say, yeah, I've got the number. I looked up that number over here in my my county names. I'm going to look at that number up, and I'm going to offset, to the right values over here. That would do the trick. In fact, I could actually put in a VLOOKUP formula into these cells. Yeah, that would work. I'm not going to do that. I'm looking for a different one. I'm looking for a more VBA-ish way to do it. Could do a find. Let's do this. Let's come and take a peek at some of these that are closer to the top. I love Alabama. Let's go look at Baldwin, Alabama. That is giving me a 4. So I come over here, my data dictionary, and right there, 4, Baldwin. So if it was giving me the 1003, then I think it makes a little more sense to say I got to do a find, but it's giving me the 4. I know the row. I should just be able to refer directly to my county name sheet and pull that value in. I know the sheet, I know the column, and now that I've got the number from cell A1, I know the row. So I'm doing that, so let's go ahead and put this in. So, so far I've looked at, I've got a variable S bound to my compare worksheet. So I'm just going to say S dot, this time let's use cells. So here I'm talking about row number. This is O is going to go right here in B1. And so we'll use a couple of different approaches here using cells. So cells it's always a little bit uncomfortable when you first use it because it's backwards. You're used to thinking of cell references as you say the column A and then the row 4, A4. But anytime you have an ordered pair in VBA, it's always the opposite way. It's always row first and then column. So B1 is going to be row 1, column 2. And I'm going to set the value of that equal to, now, I've got to refer to my worksheet over there that has my county names. And so if I look over here, I've got a tab that says county names. So that's one way I could refer to this worksheet was through the name that shows on the tab. But remember, I also, make this a little bit bigger, I also have the code name. So the name of the worksheet is county names. That's what's inside the parentheses here in my Object Explorer, my Project Explorer. But the code name is the actual name of the object. I can refer to it directly with that. So I don't have to create a variable and bind onto it. I can just use the word counties. And so I'll come here and say counties. And that's a reference to that worksheet. Dot cells. Now I want row number. What row do I want? How do I tell it what row I want? Yeah, it's this value right here. But I think I would, rather than drop this whole in here, I think I'm going to be a little bit happier with a variable. So let me declare a variable called row as a long integer. And I'm going to come in here and just set row equal to that. Oh, undo, quick. Row equals. Okay, so now I've declared a variable called row. I'm going to set that variable equal to whatever value is sitting in A1 on my compare sheet. And then I'm just going to use row where I used to refer to that cell directly. And that's mainly because when I get down here, I would like to say, where do I want to get the county name from? Well, it's row number row, column number 2. And I want the value from that. The state's just the next column over. Let me make a little adjustment here. Instead of putting in an integer here for the column, just remember that we can also put in the column letter if we want to. So the cells method accepts in that second argument, it will accept either an integer or a string. But if you give it a string, it better be a valid column letter. Or, letter, like you get past Z, you can go to, A, B, and so forth. X, X, D, F, or something like the last one is. And this is now going to read off of column 3 here as well. So maybe I'll leave that one as a 3. Okay, so now that should be it. That should bring in the county and name that I've selected. So I'll choose Bibb, Alabama. And oops, I did it wrong. So I want the state to come in right below it. So that should be, yeah, so this should be row number 2, column B. And I think this is still right. This is pulling in the right data, it's just putting it in the wrong place. So let's come give that a try again. So I change this to be 2B instead of 1C. I see the question. I'm not going to acknowledge it until I make sure this works. There we go. Calhoun, Alabama. And Chilton? Chilton? I don't know how to say that. Question over here? No? The easy part is done. What else do we want to show in right below the state now? Now we want all of the data for whatever county we just chose. Ooh. This is a little more work. So that data is over here. Let me go back to one that I'm a little familiar with. I'm going to go back to Baldwin, the first county I can pronounce. All right, so this is row number 4, Baldwin, Alabama. So I got to come over here now and find the right data. Is it row number 4? Is the data I want? Oh, wouldn't it be great? Is the data on row number 4? How do we know? Well, we come back over here to county names. We look at row number 4 and we go Baldwin. That is, the ID is 1003. Come back to my data. And 1003 is, oh, it's not row 4, it's row 5. What do we do? Like a VLOOKUP? Should we do a lookup here? Should we do a find? Is there a shortcut that might help us out here? Now, I was expecting to see it on row number 4, and where was it? Row 5. Now, if that pattern holds, maybe I can just offset. Let's take a look at a couple other ones. I'm going to come back here. Let me pick one a little further down. I got Baldwin. Let me go to Bibb. So Bibb is now 6. Let me come over here and look at my data for county names. Row 6, that's Bibb. That's 1007. The question is, when I come to 1007, will it be on row number 7? Just offset by 1. Find 1007. It is on row number 7. We check one more, and we're going to find out. And wait a minute. This data is in exactly the same order as the counties are listed on the county sheet. How come it's off by 1? It's in the same order. Why is it off? There's a header on this sheet. That's right. There's a header here. So here, our data doesn't start until row number 2, whereas our data in our counting names begins on row number 1. Okay, so we've got the number. We got the number. We can go straight to the row that we want for our data. That's great news. Great news. Okay, so now if I've chosen Bibb, Alabama, I got to get to this data right here. Oh, the problem is it's going across rows, and I got to put it down columns. How am I going to do it? There's some functionality built into Excel already called transpose. Can we just transpose? We could transpose. I think that's probably what we will do because it's really easy if we transpose. Our other approach would be to write a loop. We could have one loop that or a loop that controls variables, and as we go over one column to where we're reading from, we could go down one row to where we're reading from. Over one, down one, over one, down one. So we could write a loop that would do that pretty easily. Oh, but transpose sounds so much more sexy. Oh, it's a question? Transpose and offset. So what offset does, it takes some range, and I've got the range then has an offset method that I can say, here's the range I'm talking about, now offset a certain number of rows and columns and talk about a different range. So the active cell keeps on moving, not necessarily. So offset, well, there's an offset method in VBA, and there's also an offset function in Excel. You mean the offset method in VBA that we've used a few times? Yeah, so that just takes a range, doesn't change its shape or its orientation, and it shifts it. Offset will do a shift. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do and that's what transpose will do. It'll just rotate it. It'll just take the rows and make them into columns. What's that? The question is, why do we need to do that? And the answer is, I've got to get all these values lined up. So here's the first variable, the value for the first variable, second variable, third variable going across the row. On my compare sheet, I got to put them right here. 1, 2, 3, going down. That's what I'm after here. It's just a. Oh yeah. I certainly could have when I put these variable names in here, I could have put them right across the top. But because they're really wide, I like them better down the side because I can just see a lot more of the data that way. Yeah. So it is a preference. I think it's a pretty generally accepted preference. I think a lot of folks would prefer the same way I prefer today. That's not always the case. I like some really weird things in life. Like the 18th century, as you may have noticed. Not all folks share the preference for the 18th century. All right. So, how would you do it? If you had no idea how to do the transpose in VBA, what would you do? Step 1. What is step 1? Yeah, just record yourself doing it. You can record yourself doing it if you want to. I'm going to record myself doing it just so we can kind of see the process. But the code is going to be really simple, so you'll be able to type it really easily. So let me just come over here to where my data are. I've got that row selected. I'm going to record. So record macro. Macro 1's a great name. I'm going to copy, Control-C. I'm going to come over here to my compare. I'm going to select B3, right-click, and do a paste transpose, which is this one right here. And that pastes those values right in there. Stop recording. And let's go take a look at the code. Now we'll have made a new module. So here's module 2. And so I'm copying a sheet. I'm selecting a new location. I'm selecting some place to put it. And then with a selection, I'm doing a paste. Remember, this is the way that recorded code happens. You select something, you do something with it. And so it records the selection action, and then it records you doing something with whatever is selected. We want to avoid that whenever possible. There's no really reason for us to select that cell. We don't even need to select that sheet. I guess we're already on that sheet. But we could just say, I want to refer to that range and do the paste. Now, as I look at how this recorded, there's a method called paste special, but it has lots of different options, right? You could paste like formulas, or you can paste values, or you can, I'm not sure what the operation. Did you ever know this? You could say, like, I want to paste this, but don't paste these values. Like, add 12 on all these values. You can do like an operation when you paste to add some number onto everything. That seems strange. Or you can like paste it over the top of something, and you can add it on top of what's already there. Lots of crazy things you can do here. Here's the one I'm interested in, transpose. So in fact, all these other things, I'm happy with the defaults. So I'm just going to say paste special and then transpose. So I'm going to copy that, and you could type that, but that's the, I'll take the dot and whatever. Okay, so now I'm ready to go and integrate that into my code. And so now let's just go ahead and refer to that next location. Oh, first I need to do a copy. I haven't done the copy yet. I'm going to paste this in here even though it's an error, and let's do the copy. Okay, so how do I get to the data that I want to copy? I heard someone say we can increment row. Now that we've used our row variable to refer to the names of my counties, I think I'm done going to that sheet. And the row that I want now is one more than it used to be because I've got the header sitting over here on my data sheet. So I'm just going to increment my row. I'll come here and say row equals one more than it used to be. All right, so now a new thing. Here, I'm going to copy the whole row of row. So I got to get to the right sheet. Good news. I think my data sheet is named. Yeah, the data set, the sheet with the label data set is just called data. So I can refer to that directly through code. So I'm going to say data dot. Now here, I'm going to refer to the rows, the collection of all the rows. I'm not sure we've seen this before, but we have seen ranges. Here's a range. We've seen a collection of cells and tell which cell we want. We can refer to the collection of all the rows on that worksheet by saying rows. It's a collection. I can give it a number. The number I'm interested in, I could say row number 3. That's talking about row number, that's the whole row. It's a range object that has all the cells in row number 3. So instead of 3, what do I put here? Yeah, row. So this is the row that has the data I'm interested in. When we first set the value of row, it was the row that had the county name. We needed to offset by 1 to get to our data, and so after we're done using it for county names, we just push it down 1, and now it's ready to go for the rows for reading the data. Now I'm going to copy that whole row. Now I want to drive home an idea here, and that is even though it's tempting to think, oh, you're using the row object, it's not a row object. What kind of object is it? It's not like there's some new kind of object that we haven't seen before called rows. This is what? What kind of object? Is it a worksheet? Is it a workbook? Is it a shape? This is some kind of object we've played with a lot. What kind of object am I referring to here? Not a row. There's no such thing as a row object. It's a range. Yeah, it's a range object. So it has all the properties and methods that any range object would have. It's just the method that I use to identify that range is called rows. And we've used lots of different methods to refer to ranges. We've got active cell, that refers to a range. We've done refer to a cell and then said offset, that refers to a range. Right here, we've said cells, and we've said range. All those gets to a range. It's another way to get to a range. I give it one index, now I've copied it. Okay, so now I just have to decide where I want to paste. Well, I want to paste kind of somewhere similar to where I was before. So I'll just come over here. So my destination sheet, cells row number 2, now it's row number 3. And so that would do the paste special and transpose. But I want to show you kind of something else, kind of a different way to refer to this. As you might guess, there's a rows method that will let me get all the cells in a row. There's also a columns method. So watch this, a little bit different. And again, this is probably exactly how I would do it. The code that I have right here is probably exactly how I would do it if I was just doing this to get it done. But because I'm kind of showing you different things about working with ranges, we're kind of mixing things up a bit. And so here, I'm going to say columns. Now, which column am I talking about? Like the rows, I only give one index now. Columns, which column? Yeah, column number 2. It's column B, this is column number 2. Now, I do not want to do a paste transpose, a paste special transpose into the values of all of the cells in column 2, which is what I'm telling it to do here. I mean, it would probably try to fill in all 1.04 million here. I want to talk about doing this paste transpose into a single cell. Well, you don't really paste transpose to a single cell, you just tell it where to start. And so this now is a range. Every range has a collection of cells. Dot cells. And now I can just refer to whichever cell I want to. And now here, I'm just going to give it a single index. So I've got a whole column of cells. It's all right here. I want this to go into the third cell. And that's just how it counts. 1, 2, 3. And so I should be able to put the third cell in this collection of cells, range defined by all of the cells in column 2. Okay? If I wanted to, from there I could do an offset. It's just, all of these things are returning references to ranges, and so any of the methods I can use on a range, I can use on any of these. I'm going to say the value, I'll do the paste transpose, and that should do it. Oh, I like it. I'm going to come back to my code over here on my compare sheet, and I'm going to go from Bibb, Alabama to Calhoun, Alabama. Oh, C-O-L-U-M-N-S, object required, S.C-O-L-U-M-N-S. Oh, that looks like it should work so much. Debug. Oh, there's no value. Value is actually getting to the property. The paste special is a method of the range, not a method of the value. My mistake there. So let's try another one. Cherokee, Choctaw, Alabama, and we see those values change as it goes in. Coosa, or Covington, I can say Covington. So far, so good. Questions? Well, it turns out we're doing pretty good. I mean, this is already a lot better than it used to be, right? You want to look at a particular county? Great, pick the county. You want to look at Utah County? Let's go look at Utah County. Should be able to come down here, find Utah. It'll be somewhere towards the end. Virginia, QRST-UV. QRST, it's after Texas. There's Utah. And Millard County. Utah County, there's our county. So what was the total population estimate in 2008 for July 1st? 49,000 people. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's 530,000 people. The 49 is the code. That's the ANSI code for the county. Resident population, there's probably something that we, like children under, there we go, under 5 years. We should be high compared to other folks here. Speaking of comparing, oh, that's the next thing that'd be really nice. I'd like to be able to bring in Salt Lake County and compare Utah County to Salt Lake County. But what does my code do right now? Just overwrites whatever's there. Overwrites whatever's there. So what do I have to do? And I kind of have a problem in my code here because I'm just assuming, everything about this assumes I'm writing into column B or column 2. Talk to me in English. What do I got to do? Go ahead. Okay, so what you're saying is we could start off by saying, let's figure out what column we should be writing to, and then we'll use that variable in all the places we refer to it that we'll say, okay, no, we're not writing to column 2, we're writing to column 3. I calculated 3, and so we'll use that variable to figure out that would totally work. I saw someone have it looked like a flash of inspiration. Oh, a tricky little it's a trick. You'd say, listen, our code writes to column 2. Let's just make sure there's room in column 2. Insert a new column. Push everything over, and our code's ready to go. I like that solution. It's going to save us all kinds of time. So what he says is, first thing, let's just insert into column 2. So S dot. Now we've seen one way to refer to the column just by saying, column 2. That would get us that whole column. I'm going to show you a different way to get there. I'm going to say range B1. This is going to be in column. This is a cell in column 2. It could be any cell in column 2. B123. That's some cell way down there. From here, I'm going to say I want to refer to that range's entire column. So there's a method of a range called entire column. Whatever the range is, just push that thing out so the whole column of that range fills up. It could be a single cell. It could be multiple cells wide. And you're just saying take that and extend it out to the full column. So here's another way to get to a particular column. It's an arbitrary cell. As long as it's one cell in that column, it's always going to bring back that whole column. Question? Could I just say range B? No. But let me show you. Something close to that. I think it's what you just said, but I couldn't hear you because I was talking. We'll get there in a second. From here, I'm just going to say insert. IN. What does insert do? Just inserts. With the column, it's going to insert and push everything over to the left. To the right. It'll push it to the right. So the question was, couldn't I just somehow refer to B? And the answer is yes. Let me give an alternate for this line. It's not just B, though. I would come in here and say B:B. And so that's just a syntax that you would use in Excel to refer to an entire column. If you want to refer to a whole row, like row 7, 7:7, that would do it as well. We don't need both of these. Either one of these will do. So I'm going to leave the one that I thought of and take out the other one. But either one would do the trick. Go ahead. Oh, just B: without the... I don't know the answer to that. Let's make sure this one works. And then we'll go explore your suggestion, which I think has very little chance of working. But we'll give it a shot. Oh no, what has happened? Oh no. Nothing happened. I tricked you because when you insert a column, it assumes the width of the column right next to it, the one to the left of it. And so we'll need to do one more thing to make this workable, and that is at our very end, after we put the data in here, let's come in here and say, oh, let's use our other syntax down here. Here's another way that will get us to the entire, yeah, that's good. It's good that I'm changing that because there was something extraneous in there. So I don't even have to say entire column because the range, that there already gets me to the entire column. And so here I'm just going to say AutoFit. AutoFit. How does he know all this stuff? He's so smart. I recorded it like 3 or 4 times and then it just stuck. It's really simple. Refer to the range. You got to have the whole column. You can't AutoFit a cell unless it's a whole column. Then you can AutoFit it. You can AutoFit a whole row as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and AutoFit this one by hand by double-clicking the boundary between the 2 columns. And now I'll go bring in, I know we've got Wasatch County, we've got Utah County, and let's compare us to Salt Lake County. Oh, we got to go higher for Salt Lake County. Salt Lake, and that now brings it, AutoFit failed. You may have to go to the entire column to do that. That's funny because that is the whole column. Let me just say .entire column here. I think it'll work. Yeah, interesting. Even though that range is the whole column, it doesn't realize it. We have to say entire column. That's kind of lame. So, but let's try it. The question was, can you just say B:? And I think not a chance, but I've been wrong before. Let's go get Sanpete County. Yeah, no good. Let's go ahead and put that B back in there and X. Okay, wow. We are now really useful. So now I'm interested in comparing Sanpete, Salt Lake, Wasatch, and Utah County on this demographic data that we got from the census. And it's all laid out here really well. So well, in fact, if I wanted to, I could select my headers. Maybe I'm interested in comparing, where was the one about children under 5? Under 5 years, right? This one right here. The percent would be a little bit better for this example. Control click, highlight that. And I'm just going to insert a chart. I'll just insert a column chart for that. There we go. As I suspected, Utah County is the reigning champion on the number of children under 5 years old. We got like almost 12%. Sanpete County barely more than 8%. I'm not serious about this. Now, it would be nice if we could make this so we could let's just pick the row and it would automatically generate the chart. Maybe a button that says build chart. We're going to do that, not today, but this will be our example when we see how to work with charts. So pull the data in that you want, select the variables that you want, and build the charts, and we'll have that happen automatically. So, pretty good. One more thing I'd like to do, and that is I'd like to give us a clean way to clear this data out. Truth is, if I was really just building this for myself, I probably wouldn't do the button, but we've got like more than 15 minutes to go in class. And so I'm going to give myself a button right here that will allow me to clear this data off. And so, to figure out how to clear this data off, it's not so easy because I've got to infer where the data stops. Well, actually, I just thought of some way that would be really, really easy. What's that? That's what we're going to do. That's the part that's a little bit more difficult. We'll do that, and then I'm going to show you the even easier way. You'll probably curse me, but you got to see this other stuff. Yeah. You're saying just like come here, Control Shift right arrow, and pull it up. And there's actually an analog to doing that in VBA, which is what we're gonna do. But here's the trouble. Let's suppose someone hits this clear button, and all I've got. So that's the idea. I want to come here and do like Control Shift right arrow to get the data that I'm after. Well, let's suppose I've only got one column of data. So I'm going to delete these, Control minus. And if I'm right here and I hit Control right arrow, what does it do? Yeah, that's picking up more than I want. Well, the truth is, if I deleted all that, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world anyway. That's also making this easier, but not showing you what I want to show you. So I want to show you how to be able to duplicate that Control right arrow or Control down arrow through VBA code because it's extremely useful. Be able to say, I want to go to the end of the contiguous data, right? That's what it tells me, to the end of the contiguous data. And so I'm going to do that with, well, let's just take a look. I'm going to show you first going down. So I'm going to print range B1, R-A-N-G-E, range B1, dot, okay. Now, here's a little trick. I'm not sure it's really a trick. Back in the olden days, before the invention of the control key. Whoa, Professor Allen, you remember before the control key? I remember before the control key. You needed to have some way to be able to, navigate. There's no control down arrow because there's no control. How are you going to do it? Well, it turns out there's a 2-keystroke sequence that does the same thing. It's the end key. So you've got an end key on your keyboard. You hit tap end. Whoa, look at down there on the bottom left-hand corner. It takes me into end mode. I'm in end mode. Ooh. Now, if I hit the down arrow, it's just the same as hitting control down, but it's a 2-keystroke sequence. And up arrow, same as control up. And left and right. That was the original way to do it. In fact, I taught this for years before I even knew that control did the same thing as end, left arrow. Some student taught me that. But the point is, that's the origin of the method that does it. So I'm going to say end, and then I'm going to give it a constant, XL down. Now I'll ask for the address. The important thing to realize here, when I do this, it is not going to change what cell is active. I'm not selecting a different cell. I'm just referring to a different cell. So B85 is the last cell going down. If I start in B1 and hit control down, B85 is the one I would be on. But here I haven't selected it. It's important. I've just referred to it. See how the active cell is still B1? Active cell could be somewhere else. Active cell could be over here. And now I'm just going to refer to that. It never changes the active cell. It's just a way to refer to a different cell. What is this XL down? What is this, some kind of mystical thing? Well, XL down is a constant that's built into VBA. It's just, what's a constant? Constant's the same thing as a variable, except you can't change it once it gets its first value. What's a variable? A named location in memory of a particular type. Okay, so it's some location in memory that holds a value. Same thing as a constant, so I can just ask what XL down is. Whoa, that was even close. It's negative 4142. I wonder what XL up is. Negative 4162. What's XL2 left? Whoever wrote this end method said, you know what, you give me a negative 4159 as the parameter here to my parameter, and I'm going to do a move to left. I don't know why they chose those numbers, but those are the numbers. But fortunately, we don't have to think about those numbers because we have the constants. So it's just a named location in memory that holds a value. What value is held in XL down? It's this one right here. I could take that, plug it in place of XL down, would behave exactly the same. Do you want to see that? Do you believe me or do you want to see it? Oh, you want to see it. Okay. We don't believe you. You were wrong about the whole way to select a column. So it's still, getting me to B85, the same as XL down B85. So it's just a name. It's a named location in memory, and what's held there is that value there that we need. Now, the trouble is, if I do an XL to right, an XL to right, and XL to right, XL, there we go. It's going all the way to the end. I don't want to go all the way to the end. And so watch this. Instead of, and this is a neat little trick to learn, especially if you have holes in your data. So you're saying, I want to get to the end of the data, but there's a hole in the data. And there's an empty cell, and my XL to the right is going to hit that empty cell. Won't be the case here, but that's quite often the case. So instead of starting at the cell and going over, I'm going to say cells at a particular row, row number 1, and a particular column, 550,000, 5,000. There's only 16,000, so 5,000 should do the trick. And instead of going to the right, I'm going to come to the left. I'm just going the opposite way. Start way out there to the right and come backwards to see where the data ends. So now it doesn't matter if I only have one column here. I'm still going to come back here and find the one that I'm after. I don't really want the address. What do I want? I want the column. I want the column. And so that's where my data ends on the column. Okay. One more little trick here, and that is I don't really know how many columns there are, but I can ask. Columns.count. And so that does the same thing. Columns.count is like 16,000 something, but just print columns.count will tell me how many columns there are. And so this tells me go first row all the way to the end, come back until you bump into something, and that's what we're after. So let's use this that we just learned to figure out how to build an expression to delete all of that data. So back to my code. I'll make another sub procedure, sub clear data. I'm still going to go ahead and dim S and set it the way we did before. Let me dim something called last column or last call as an integer. And now I'm going to say my last column equals whatever that column is. So now I'm going to compose a range. Another way to do a range. I think we've seen this one before, but let's take a closer look at it. Range, I'll tell what range I want later in a minute. Here, all I want to do is say dot delete. Now this range is going to take 2 arguments. This is going to be a multi-cell contiguous range. I'm going to give it a cell to start in, and I'll give it a cell to end in. Where do I want to start? Well, I want to start in S, and the range is going to be B1. It's always going to start in B1. Where's it going to end? S.cells, row number 1, column number, last call. The very one that I calculated is the last one to hold the data. I've got, this is going to give me this is just going to give me a band right across, and so I want to extend that to the entire column. It's kind of a complex line. So this says I'm looking at the worksheet my summary worksheet, my compare worksheet, row number 1, whatever my last column is. And so if I figured out 12 was my last column, this is going to be row A12. It's going to be the 12th column, first row. And I'm now from here saying, starting in B1, that's where my data is going to start. I'm talking about that whole range. And then from there, I'm popping that out to the whole column, and then I'm saying delete. Be a little bit careful here because there's still a little issue that can actually delete all of your data, including the labels. Let me add a few more in here. That should give me 2. Beautiful. I'll assign that macro to a button. Developer, insert a button. This will be my clear. And this is clear data. And I'll say clear on it. And this should now clear that data. Now, I'm going to put something over here in column E, just so we can see that as I'm coming back to find this, this is not going to be disturbed. So I'll click clear, and it should pull those 2 columns out. The E slides over, but it didn't, we were looking across that top row to find out where the data are. Now, if I was to run that again, I would come over here, and what column would I find out for my last column? It would come back here and hit A1. And then I would say B1 to A1 delete, which would delete all of this as well. So let's do one more thing, and we'll call it good. And that is, let's just put a little if statement in here, a little preview for our next lecture talking about conditional branching. I'm going to say if last call is equal to 1, and I know I didn't have any data there. Now you remember we talked about exit for or exit do to get out of a loop. There's also an exit sub. So we're going to say, go ahead and figure out what my last column is. If that last column is 1, there's no data. I don't need to delete anything. Otherwise, we've got stuff to delete. So now I should be able to clear this, and it should be OK. I'll add myself some more data. I may just bring this down a little bit so it doesn't bounce over. My clear button should clear that away just fine. Hit it again, and it won't clear. I'll post this code, but that's enough for today. Okay.